Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Phil Bazaire. I'm a faculty relations manager here in cooperative education at the University of Waterloo. I'm very happy to be here with you today to talk a bit more about preparing for your co-op journey here at Waterloo. All the students who are joining us here today, you're all excellent students because, well, you were admitted to Waterloo Engineering, and that's not an easy feat. So congratulations first and foremost. But you all have very different experience as well coming into this opportunity. For many of you, your first work term will be starting in winter 2021, depending on your stream, in which case you'll be starting to look for work in that very first fall semester when you're with us. And then for others, you'll be in a Stream 8 program. You'll have that first work term in the spring of 2021. So a little bit more time to prepare for cooperative education, but it is never too soon to be thinking about preparing for that first application for a job. Now, cooperative education is a large operation, as many of you know, at Waterloo, and we have a large team focused on all the various elements that need to come together to make co-op work for all the students that participate. We have many staff who are actively trying to develop job opportunities, and there's some unique challenges with that in this current climate. Other staff like myself work with faculty colleagues in an effort to build bridges between the academic experience that you'll be having in your engineering program with the workplace opportunities that you'll be experiencing as well. We also have a small army of career advisors in our Center for Career Action, which is connected to our department, and they specialize in helping students get that first co-op job, all the preparation, preparing resumes, all those different pieces, being successful in an interview environment, standing out from the crowd. That's what they specialize in. And in fact, they'll actually be in your classes virtually, of course, this year, but providing some instruction as part of your regular learning within engineering. So you'll have exposure to all of these different pieces in an effort to help you be successful at the end of the day. The point of all of this is that there's a lot of experience and expertise all at your fingertips from the second you begin in September. And the reality is a lot of that experience is being made available to you a little bit early as well. You've been able to benefit from the Waterloo Ready programming and from live chats like the one today. And all of this is in the hopes of getting you feeling prepared to get started on your co-op journey. For today, though, we really want to lean on the experience of some of our talented students, all of whom were in your shoes just a few short years ago. So we will invite Pirashan, Milena, and Patrick to share some of their experiences, and they'll also be handling some of the Q&A as we move through the presentation today. But without further ado, we'll get started here. And even though for many of us we are working remotely at the moment from home offices and whatnot, we still do acknowledge the entire Waterloo community acknowledges that we live and work on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. The University of Waterloo is situated on the Haldimand Tract, which is land that was promised to the Six Nations. It includes 10 kilometers on each side of the Grand River. Now, I would like to, before we get into speaking with our talented students, I do want to remind everyone who's joining us of your homework that hopefully you've all completed. In fact, this is really just a reminder. There was some pre-work that was provided to you. And if you have not seen this, it can be accessed through the Waterloo Ready site. So you can click in, I believe it's under the July 20th materials. But you'll be able to see this information. And what this really is an opportunity for you to start thinking about your resume now. As I said earlier, it's never too soon to start thinking about it. And part of the thinking that sometimes needs to go into this for students, particularly those who don't necessarily have a lot of work experience, is to start thinking like an employer, and specifically thinking about the kinds of skills that employers are looking for. So this exercise is meant to highlight some of those pieces. Once you can start thinking about what the employers want, then you can start thinking about how to articulate the different ways that you might have that experience or meet the expectations of that employer. So there's some good examples there that draw on, the idea of working in a customer service environment or being a tutor, or maybe, if you're handy and changing the oil in your parents' car. Those are all different pieces of your puzzle, your personal puzzle, that you can then think about how to articulate how you're meeting the needs of our employers. So if you've not already done that, please take the time. It's a really good exercise, especially as you're thinking about preparing, again, to begin your co-op studies at Waterloo. But we're not going to spend too much time on that or any more time on that today. Just a recap and a reminder that that is available for you. From there, we are certainly going to move to the rock stars of our show, the upper year students, to share their experiences, and they actually have their first co-op resumes that they can share for you. So they've got more experience and probably a very different looking resume now, but they'll be able to show you what that looks like. And of course, we'll have some question and answers for roughly half of the 60-minute session today. And we'll have a number of students, whether you're typing questions in now or during the Q&A portion, we do have students that are moderating that and able to respond as we go. Now, there is obviously a big elephant in the room, so to speak, which is that COVID-19 has obviously forced a lot of individuals, not just the University of Waterloo, but the broader community and society and the world at large, to adjust the way that we do things. So certainly we recognize that there are probably some questions regarding our own response to COVID-19. And the first thing, if you're not aware, the first thing to be aware of is that for fall 2020, instruction will be entirely online for our incoming students in order to limit that exposure. So from the very beginning, we've been trying to follow public health guidelines to the best of our ability. And the best place to get up-to-date information on our COVID-19 response is on the website on your screen, uwaterloo.ca/coronavirus. And in fact, if you go to any of our main websites, there's a link and a red banner at the very top of the screen that will take you to that same website listed there. So if you do have any questions, I would encourage you to take a read through that website, as you may find a number of FAQ sections listed there that will allow you to find the answers that you're looking for. Now, a quick comment on the question and answer option today for you. So many of you have likely been in video chats up to this point. We have disabled the chat function for today, and instead you'll see a Q&A option or a button that you can avail yourself of to ask any questions. And again, we have staff on hand to help work through those questions. Now, we will provide additional ways to communicate with us at the end of the presentation, such that if you have questions that you're not necessarily comfortable asking in a format such as this, or if by chance we don't happen to get to your question, you will have the opportunity to follow up with our staff afterward. Okay, and then lastly, before we get started, I do want to highlight, because we're all watching this from our various rooms and homes and whatnot, in case there are technical difficulties, this presentation is being recorded and it will be made available within a week. So you'll be able to find that on the website. And again, there'll be links so that you can follow up with any questions that you may have afterward. But without further ado, I would like to introduce our first student panelist, Pirashan. As you can see there, a chemical engineering student. Welcome, Pirashan. Thank you for participating today. And I would ask, maybe to get us started, if you just want to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience. You've listed some transferable skills there in the table, so maybe you can expand on that a little bit to get the conversation started.
So I'm Pirashan. I just finished my 3A term in chemical engineering. And I'm currently on my 4th work term with the University of Waterloo. But for my first co-op term, my position was a leak surveyor with HETEC. And for the column with most transferable skills, generally what that means is if in an interview, an interviewer asks me about a position, this is the point that I like to touch on the most. So for HETEC, I generally try to talk about my communication skills that I developed as a leak surveyor. And then my second co-op position was with Toyota. So that was my first time in, I guess, an engineering role. So the most transferable skill that I learned there was critical thinking using root cause analysis. And the reason I like to touch on that point is that it's one of the things that Toyota is well known for within the industry. So I like to use that because a lot of interviewers tend to notice that first off of the resume. So bringing that up also helps me out during the interview. My third co-op term was as a chemical engineer with Tremco. Um, and at Tremco, I did work on critical thinking using root cause analysis. However, you want to bring up different transferable skills from different jobs. So one thing that I like to point out from there is project management.
Great, thanks, Piershawn. And I'll highlight as well that you are actively supporting the university community in your current role as a summer academy ambassador. So that's wonderful. And just as a bit of a homework project for you, you can give some thought to what transferable skills you're taking away from this experience as well. Now we'll slide over to the next one here, and this, for those of you who are joining us, this is a look at Piershawn's first work term resume that he used. So take us through this if you can, Piershawn, if you want to touch on, what you feel worked well for you, maybe what didn't work so well, certain pieces, maybe you can talk about why you chose to include them or not, but feel free to share a little bit more.
So I did blur out a few things here and there for privacy's sake, but going through it, one of the biggest things I noticed with first year students making resumes is that you tend to feel that you don't have enough experience to put on your resume. So a lot of people tend to overcompensate by putting a lot of information that might be redundant to employers. So I tried to keep it as short and sweet as possible. So I did have prior work experience. So I was a factory employee and also a convenience store cashier. So I had that under relevant experience. And although I am in chemical engineering, I tried to bring as much transferable skills as possible from those two positions that I could talk about during interviews. So for the factory employee, I spoke about WMIS training and safety data sheets because that's one thing that process engineers need to have training on. So I felt that that would stand out a bit. Being able to handle fast-paced, busy environment, that was just one point I felt would stand out. It would show that I work well under pressure. With the convenience store cashier, I was just putting out skills that I had to use during the time. So basic accounting skills, handling sales. So I guess it was me trying to show my independence and being able to work as a cashier because it's not an easy job. And one position that when I applied for was Toyota. So Toyota actually likes to compare themselves to McDonald's in the way that they work. So there's definitely places where you can find transferable skills to put on your resume. Don't think that any experience that you have doesn't stand out or it's not important enough. You just have to make sure you pick the right experiences. A lot of you probably have a lot of volunteer experience if you don't have any work experience. Same thing with the volunteer experience. You just got to pick out the points that really stand out and are transferable to the positions you want to apply for. For skills, I put down a few things that I was actually learning during my first term. So Autodesk, P&ID, I did not learn that in high school, but I knew that I would be learning it throughout the first term. So I decided to put it on my resume. Also MATLAB, Python, and C++. Depending on your program, you'll be learning different things throughout your first term. And I think it's highly recommended to put down some of the courses or some of the things that you'll be learning during your first 1A term. Also for training, I thought that Red Cross and WMIS were two things that stood out. So I put those in. I also think it's important to put your interests because sometimes interviewers like to talk about things other than work. So one of my interviewers actually, for I think 5-10 minutes out of a 30-minute interview, he was speaking to me about the NBA since I put basketball on my interests. So I felt like that helped me build a better connection with the interviewer. So I would recommend an interest section. And yeah, like I said before, keeping it short and sweet is very important.
That's great. Thank you. And I like your comment about having a conversation about the NBA at one of my very first job interviews, which resulted in a co-op job myself.
Mm-hmm.
I was told after the fact that it was my personal interests that was one of the main reasons I received the interview in the first place. So you never know what's going to tweak the interviewer's interests. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the idea of, so you mentioned making sure that your resume spoke to what the employer was looking for, like we mentioned earlier. Now, in the co-op program, of course, students are applying to many jobs
Mhm.
as part of the process. So to what extent did you, if you can think back, to what extent did you have to tweak your resume for the different kinds of employment opportunities that you were looking for?
So for first year, I think I only made two different versions. So this version that's posted up, and then another one with slight modifications. But looking back on it, if I could go back, I would make various versions because there were different positions that I applied to, such as lab positions or process engineering positions. So there are different things that they're looking for in an employee. So for example, on Waterloo Works, there are sections where they post the required skills or the skills that they're looking for in a person. And what I do now is I make different resume versions for different employers using the keywords that they themselves post. Because what ends up happening is when they're going through your resume, those keywords stand out. Like you can see that I bolded MATLAB, Python, C++, and Autodesk. So say, for example, if I'm applying to a job that might be asking for MATLAB experience, the reason I bolded those few terms is because I want those things to stand out to the employer when they first look at the resume. Because a lot of employers, when they're looking at resumes, they're just skimming through a whole stack of them. So you really want your resume to stand out at first look.
Thank you. That's great, Piershawn. We appreciate that. And don't worry, we'll hear from more from Piershawn as part of the Q&A as well. But thanks again.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have Milena, who's a student in our biomedical engineering program, which is an 8-stream program. So first work term would be in the spring for all the incoming students. So I'll invite Milena to share her screen, or not share her screen, but turn on her video and share a little bit about her experiences so far.
So hi everyone, my name is Milena Galashevich. I'm just about to finish my 2B biomedical engineering term. And yeah, I guess let's get started with my co-op terms. So I've been lucky enough to actually have quite a few jobs in biomedical engineering itself. It can be difficult to find something specifically related to that field just because usually I found that a lot of the jobs in biomedical engineering you need to have very technical skills, which can be difficult for you to have as an incoming first year student, but there's definitely opportunities for incoming students to still get co-op jobs in that field. So for example, my first co-op term was at Niagara Health System in St. Catharines, Ontario, which is a hospital system, I guess. And yeah, so I was working in the biomedical engineering department, but I was doing like a mixture of 3D printing and developing the initiative of 3D printing in the entire Niagara region. So usually in a biomedical engineering division in a hospital, they actually work hands-on with the machines, but because I wasn't certified to do that, I was able to actually learn a lot about the machines, but I couldn't work with them hands-on. Nonetheless, I still did a lot of development for devices within the hospital that were low risk. So I was 3D printing pieces that could assist doctors in processes and, like, for example, clip-ons to machines, or finding new ways to decrease costs in hospitals. So instead of buying new parts, I would design them and 3D print them. Also, while this was going on, I was working with an oncologist to 3D print tumors or patient anomalies found in CAT scans. So I would get these 2D CAT scans and generate models, 3D print them, and then they would be used for patient education to teach patients, what's going on and how are we going to approach this problem. So it was definitely a very different kind of biomedical engineering job, and I learned a lot. Another perk of working at a hospital is I was able to watch a lot of surgeries, so that was a unique experience, and I definitely saw how biomedical technologies and devices are being used directly live, and you saw it all. So it's definitely really interesting, and that's just the perk of having a co-op in a hospital. My second co-op job was a medical device associate, or also a quality assurance associate at Biointegral Surgical. So Biointegral Surgical is a company that creates creates cardiovascular products made out of biomodified tissue. So to translate that a little is they use porcine or bovine pericardium or biological tissue, so from cows or pigs, and they actually treat the tissue and they develop biological products that are then implanted in patients, specifically in the cardiovascular system. So for example, they would recreate the aorta and then implant it in patients. And this product specifically used to be available in the US and it is now available only in Europe. This was really interesting, and from a quality assurance position, you definitely had to do a lot of attention to detail. That's my transferable skill. Quality assurance is something that a lot of biomeds get exposed to one way or another. And this is because biomedical engineering is so heavy in regulation, especially when you're working with medical devices. And that's one thing that you will probably have experienced almost in any co-op job is the ISO regulations or the CE regulations. It's an inevitable part, but it's a really interesting part that'll definitely help a lot when you go on to design your own projects throughout your university career. So yeah, throughout that co-op, I also got to work with a medical director who actually started the company. And I was doing a lot of marketing too, specifically to surgeons and professionals within the field. So it wasn't just, kind of creating information about the product that wasn't up to level. I was still learning how to use proper medical terms, how to communicate to medical professionals, and really understand how the product works on a biological level. And in the fall, I will be having a co-op job as a clinical research associate at IntelliJoint Surgical. So when you come in, hopefully in the winter or in the spring of 2021, IntelliJoint is a company that is very often seen in E7 or E5. They're located in Kitchener, and they created a device used for orthopedic surgery that allows for patient calibration. And now they're developing another product for knee surgery. And I believe that's where I'll be working on with the clinical research department.
Awesome. Thanks, Melina. That's great. I have to say, your very first transferable skill that you listed there, using resources to learn independently, really stuck with me, because I think that is one of the pieces about being in a new work environment, especially as a junior student, that often can be surprising, that students don't expect that their supervisors expect so much of them because they have their own responsibilities and tasks. So that's such an important thing to learn at an early work term, that if you can run with an idea on your own and pursue that and do the independent learning, it's all that much more valuable to an employer. So that's really, really important.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess I didn't touch quite on that, but in that specific job, using resources to learn independently at my 3D printing job was to learn how to use softwares on my own to create these models. And I know that sounds really intimidating, but I definitely learned throughout my first year, and just as a student in Waterloo, they prepare you for this. You will find thousands and thousands of resources, be it online or from the university, and the people at your co-op job will also be very helpful in helping you find the right resources to develop these skills. So it may seem intimidating, but you are definitely resource prepared to actually learn on your own.
For sure. That's great. Now here's a sneak peek at your former resume. So same idea here. If you could take us through a little bit about why you included the pieces that you did, and maybe what you would change looking back on it, or maybe what you wouldn't change. If you could just expand on that a little bit, that would be great.
Yeah, 100%. So this is my first year resume. It's a little different than the previous one. There's way more information on here. So I would definitely cut down on the information. And I think that's one thing that, as Pierre mentioned, that one thing as an incoming first-year student is you don't have enough. That's your fear, that you don't have enough skills to put on there. And I think that's where I came from a little bit, which is why I'd go in here and I would definitely pick out what's most important, because as mentioned, when people go through resumes, they pick out the most important things. And when you have so much thrown on here, it could be a lot, and they might, sometimes out of laziness because they don't want to, they might just skip over your resume. It's happened before. I've been at some co-op interviews at my previous co-ops. It's just too much. So definitely I would go in here and I would pick out, and if I can't pick out and I would still have all this information, I would learn how to phrase my skills in a much more cohesive and shortened manner. So for example of this is instead of going on and expanding about communication or being redundant and like, hey, I know how to communicate really well, I would make an emphasis on that in one of my experiences and make sure that's a pointer that, hey, while I was working at KJK Pharmacy, I learned how to communicate really well, and this is evidence of it. And when I was going to my next experience, I would emphasize another skill that I have, so that when you would be going through the resume, you would have concrete examples of how I have developed and applied every single skill. In my summary of qualifications, one thing I regret not doing more is applying or mentioning more of the skills that I learned in class. This is one thing that I really underestimated, and I was so focused on trying to find skills and qualifications from my high school experience or through volunteer experience that I kind of overlooked the course material that's actually quite applicable in the work field. So an example of this would be like root cause diagrams as engineers in your design courses. You were going to learn so many different methods that are always directly applied in your co-op. So I would definitely go back and find all those different systems and projects that I learned, and I would put them in the summary of qualifications. In terms of awards and achievements, that's something that I continuously develop because we achieve different things. So that was something I just, coming out of high school, these are my awards and achievements, but I would also minimize them and choose achievements that directly correlate to skills that I have. That's on that section. In terms of experience, again, because now I have more co-ops and I'm like learning more from different jobs, I would